Hi there, my name's Vince from mymatevince.com, and in this video today it's going to be about HDMI cable testers. So I have two of them here. Now the reason I'm doing this video is because I was sent these two by somebody who was a little bit confused because they've bought two of them. They're testing the one cable, this one here showing the cable to be perfect, this one here showing the cable to be faulty. And then he checked online and somebody online is experiencing the same problem with this one here. Now this one is a cheaper one, this one is slightly more expensive, but they are both at the bottom end of the market. For example, this one you can buy on Amazon in the UK for around, I think it's about 13 or 14 UK pounds. So they're both very cheap testers. Obviously, if you're going out and you're a professional and you're buying a good tester, you're probably not going to come across the problems that you see in this video. But at the same time, you still might learn a thing or two. So basically, I've been spending about a day looking into this, and I think I've kind of got to the bottom of why this one is testing the way it is. And I just thought I'd share it on YouTube, and then other people who have more knowledge can add their comments to the section down below, and then hopefully future viewers will actually be able to gain a good understanding of whether or not their HDMI cable is faulty when they're using testers like this. Now obviously for most viewers it's just going to be a case of plugging in the HDMI cable, and if it works, it works. But if it's your job to go around and fault find in people's houses, you might be an audio-visual engineer and you might come across HDMI runs and you're not sure if they're faulty or not, then by getting one of these testers it's going to give you a better insight. But it's still not the complete answer, because both of these will just test for continuity. And as we know, when it comes to HDMI, if you're going on a longer distance, you might still have continuity. There might be nothing wrong with the cable, but just because of the distance of the cable, you might suffer signal loss. And then it can get to the stage where you're not getting your image on the TV because you might have gone over that distance where the signal can travel. So don't just think because this says it's okay that it is okay. You might still be having problems with the actual signal strength. On more expensive testers, they can also test the signal strength as well, but not in the ones I'm testing in this video. So basically these are the two that I'm going to be testing. This one here just has a series of lights. The batteries are in this end here, and then it sends a signal from here, and if all the lights light up, apparently it's supposed to be okay. This one here is a slightly better tester. You can test the cable between this bit here or from here to the remote, and again on this remote here you can see we've got 9 lights which correspond to the 9 lights, the same one as there, but this one gives you more information because it's basically doing a continuity test around the actual pins themselves. You can see pins 1 to 19. Now on HDMI cables you have got 19 pins. So if you have a look here, this is an example of an actual plug, so that's the same as looking into this here. So obviously don't get confused because different diagrams will have different ones, because if you look at this one here, you see pin 1 is here because this is a female, this is a socket here. This one here, pin 1, is the plug, so obviously pin 1 will be getting plugged in to pin 1 there, you understand? So depending on the diagram you're looking at, it can look slightly different. So basically these are all the ones that are in use, and you can see when we come to pin 14 often it says not connected, or that's where the Ethernet pin might be installed. So you know when you have a HDMI cable with Ethernet, that will often go on pin 14, so that is often used. Now let me just show you an example, because I've got a load of cables here. Some work, some don't work. Some I know to be faulty because they have missing pins, but even the good ones will show up faulty on here on some of them, and that's what confused my friend that sent these to me, so that's why I'm doing the video. So let's crack on with this now. Let's get it on the tripod. Okay, so this is the cable that was sent to me. Now, it's a very cheap cable, but it's not the cheapest one you can get. It was bought from a high street shop for around about 4 or 5 UK pounds. But don't worry, I also have a pound shop cable, so that is obviously going to be the cheapest one that we can test. Now, what the person that sent me these did, he plugged it into here and he plugged it into here, and then he looked at it and he thought, oh brilliant, all the lights are lit up, so that means that this cable is absolutely fine. But then he plugged it into this tester here. So if we go into the main here, and then we go into this one here, and then he turned it on, we press the button. We don't have to press the button, but look, then not all the lights are lighting up. Can you see? A lot of them are missing, and then it comes up with open here under this one here. So he was a little bit confused. Then if you were to plug this one into the actual unit itself and forget about this one and press test, again you can see that not all the pins are connected. It says open. Now this confused me to begin with because I couldn't understand why, because this cable actually works. Now let me show you. I'm going to just plug it into this little PlayStation Classic down here. Plug it into there, plug the other end into the TV, and you will see that it does actually work. Yeah. But yet, when we're using this tester here, it's showing as faulty. So he wanted me to test another cable. So what I did is, this is the cable that I usually use from my PC to my monitor. I plug this cable in. I press the button. And as you can see, it all lights up and it says pass. So this tester is happy with this cable. I also plug this one into here. And again, all the lights lit up. So I was confused. What is the difference between this cable and the one he sent me, when this cable here is also a very old, not necessarily expensive? I think back in the day when I bought this, whenever it was, 5 or 6 years ago, it would have probably cost me about £6 or £7, that sort of price. So not a lot of money. Well, actually, it's quite simple what the problem is. Obviously, to cut down on cost, they're missing some of the wires out in the HDMI, and the ones they're missing out are the shielded, the ground wires, because if you look at an actual plug itself, now I printed these off the internet, all these images are available to see online if you just type in HDMI pin out. Now if you have a look here, let's start at pin 1. So pin 1 is fine, but then look at pin 2, it's a ground. And then if you were to look at pin 3, that's fine. Pin 4 is fine. Pin 5 is also a ground, and then we go on 6, 7, pin 8 is also a ground, 9, 10 and 11 is also a ground. So what some companies are doing is they're shipping HDMI cables that don't have the grounds in them, and I'll tell you why. It's because they're relying on the equipment to be grounded itself. So this is the inside of a PlayStation 4, and this is the HDMI port here, and if I zoom in here, what you will find if you go across with a multimeter is every time you see one of these dots, these tiny little dots in here, that will be a ground. So let me just show you that there. So if you see here, that one, that one, that one, and that one there, yeah? So all of these little dots here will be grounds. So in theory, you don't have to have the wire in the actual cable, because when it's grounded here, it's essentially doing the same thing. But it just shows you that it is a cheaper cable because they're cutting back by not putting the wires in there. Let me show you what I mean, and it will be more obvious then. If we take this little plug here, this is a little HDMI replacement plug, so you can, if you've cut your cable, you can try and get these into here. The problem is HDMI can be very fussy, and especially on the longer length cable, by adding something like this you might add to the loss and then it's not going to work. So let's just go on here, and you can see at the back we have different pins. Let me just put it on the ground here so you can see. There we go. Hopefully you can see all the different pins there. Now we know by looking at our diagram here that pins 2 and pins 5 are ground. So if you have a look here, pin 2 is ground and pin 5 is ground. So if we get our multimeter and we set it to continuity, so now when I touch the wires together, they're going to make a noise. If I go across pin 2, which is here, and pin 5, which is here, can you see they're not grounding together? Yeah, they're not shorting together. But yet when I do exactly the same thing into this PlayStation board here, so I've now plugged it, there we go, plugged it into the board there. Now watch, I'm going to go across the same pins and you will hear that they are shorted. So 2 and 5, yeah. And what else did we say? 8 is here, and 11 is here. Okay, and also 17. The strange thing is, on all the testing I've done, pin 17 is always connected, yeah, but on the cheaper ones they are not connected. And basically that's the difference between the cables. So you've got to be really careful when you're using these testers, because you might think your cable's faulty when it's not. It could just be a cheap cable. So for example, let's open up this pound shop cable here. Now obviously they're not going to sell a cable that doesn't work, but as I will discuss later in the video, just because it works on something that's outputting 720p or 1080p don't expect it to work on 4K with HDR. If I was to connect this into the Xbox One X to a 4K TV with HDR, this will not work. And this also has something else missing in it as well. So let me show you this. So if I plug that into there and here, you will see that, turn it on, you will see again loads of them are missing. Now if you have a look here, you will also see that number 13 is missing. So on the last one I think it was just 14, on this one it's 13 and 14 as well as the others. Now on 13, pin 13 is CEC. So let's say now CEC is, for example, when you turn on your PlayStation, it will automatically, if your TV has CEC as well, it will automatically turn on your TV and switch it to the correct HDMI port. So it saves you then having to get your remote control for the TV. You can just turn on your PlayStation or your Xbox and it will automatically turn on your TV. Now if you were to use this cable here, you might think that the Xbox or PlayStation or TV has a problem with CEC. It's not. It's this thing here that has the problem. But yet, if you were to use this other cheap cable that was sent to me, you will see that this one will work for CEC. So plug it in there and plug it into here. Press the button, you will see that 13 is lit up. But now this is interesting. On this cable here, can you see 14 is not lit up? Yet, if you look closely, this is advertised as a high-speed cable with Ethernet. Now, as far as I know, pin 14 is the one for Ethernet. I think it works between pin 14 and pin 19, which is the hot plug detect. I believe that's how it works. Now, if it's missing pin 14, how can it work with Ethernet? But yet this is advertised as high speed with Ethernet. So now I haven't got any equipment that uses the HDMI cable with Ethernet. In fact, I think it is I don't think anything really does use it. I'm sure there's some high-end equipment out there that does use it, but I've never come across anything. So is anybody ever going to know? No, they're not. But if you have a look, high speed with cable, sorry, what does it say there? High speed HDMI cable with Ethernet. But in my opinion, I wish I could test it, but in my opinion, this cable would not work with Ethernet because that pin 14 is not connected. Now, the reason these are still useful are because they can tell you if your cable is faulty once you know how to use them. So now I know that if pins 2, 5, 8 and 11 and possibly 14, well actually just go 2, 5, 8 and 11. If those pins don't light up, then I know there's still a good chance that my cable will be absolutely fine because it's going to be taking the earth from here. But now, for example, if one of the others doesn't light up, it could indicate a fault. So now let's go onto this cable here. This is a good quality HDMI high-speed cable that came with the Xbox One S. Now this cable here would normally be capable of 4K, but if you plug it in here, you will see that all the lights will light up apart from one. And now, because number 9 doesn't light up, that is a critical pin, because number 9 is down as that, okay? Which is, if we have a look here, number 9, there we go. So it is down as one of the main, I believe this is one of the main ones that's going to give you the audio and the picture. So now, if I was to use this one, even on low-end equipment like this one here, it will not work. So these testers are still definitely useful on the right, if you use them in the right way. So if you suspect your cable and you plug it, you're getting no joy, plug it into your tester and you will see here that I'm not going to get anything from there because that pin number 9 is disconnected. Now watch this, this is interesting. If I go onto the cheaper cable tester, this one here, we know 100% this cable's faulty. You've just seen that it doesn't work even on low-end equipment like the PlayStation Classic, but yet look, it lights up all here. So really, in my opinion, this cheap tester here is not worth buying because it's not going to give you enough information to tell you whether or not, with proof, the cable is working. So 100% this cable is no good because one of the pins is completely snapped off, and I can actually show you that. If you look in there, you can see that that pin there, which is pin 9, is completely missing, and yet this cable tester here says it's okay. So in my opinion, there's no problem getting something cheap, but don't go too cheap. I personally would not buy these because I don't think they're going to give you any useful information, but yet I would buy this one. Even though it's a cheap one, it will still definitely help you to fault find your cables. So now I know 100% that that one is dodgy. Now look at this one here. I've got one that has a bad connection. So it works sometimes and it doesn't work other times. It's this one here. So now if you look, when I plug this one in, press the button, you can see it's open, but sometimes then if I, on pin 15, but yet if I press the button that way, sometimes it will work. There you go. So now you can see it's working. So again, it's an easy way for you to wiggle the cables while testing it, instead of having to do it in the back of your customer's equipment, which could lead to damage. If you damage this, who cares? It's going to be, you know, another £14 that you have to spend. But if you damage their 4K TV, then you're going to have to start thinking about having to solder in a new HDMI port, which, unless you're used to doing micro soldering, you might struggle with. Right, so yeah, that I think is about it for the video. I think I'm just going to show you whether or not they work on 4K or not. So basically, I think that this is still a good tool if you take it with its limitations. So don't just rely on this saying pass or fail, because this will only pass a good cable which has all the pins connected. Well, not necessarily a good cable, it can still be a cheap cable, but it has to have all 19 pins connected. So now this is the best cable that I've got. This is basically a premium certified cable, and what this means is that it's been sort of guaranteed to pass, I think it was 18 gigabits per second. Probably says on the back here somewhere, but basically what it will allow is 4K at 60 hertz, so 4K at 60 frames per second. But a lot of the cheaper cables will still allow that. So for example, this one here will allow that, even though it's not certified and even though it's old. You just need to basically test your cables before going out and buying new ones, because just because they're old, don't think that they're not going to do the latest equipment, because a lot of the time they will. Because remember, these specifications, such as HDMI 1.4 or HDMI 2, they link to the actual equipment itself. For example, the TV and your Xbox or PlayStation or set-top box, whatever you're plugging into it. The cable itself, if you think of it, is just really a dumb pipe. But different cables are made differently. So for example, if you want a high-spec cable, normally it will have thicker, it could possibly have a thicker AWG, American wire gauge. So the lower the number, the fatter the cable. Obviously the fatter the cable, the less resistance, so the better the signal. Also, they will have better shielding, and the most basic thing of all is they will have all 19 pins connected. So if I go onto this one here, you will see that all 19 pins are connected, and it says there pass. So this cable is absolutely fine to use, and because I know it's a premium certified cable, basically I've future-proofed this cable. So this cable should be good for many years to come. But don't get conned into thinking you have to buy expensive cables. That's not the case. But there definitely is a difference between cheaper cables and more expensive cables. Now, just to show you that the cheap pound shop cable, I'm just going to take it into the other room where the Xbox is, and I'm basically just going to show you the pound cable not working on 4K, and then I'm going to show you this cable, which is still a cheap cable, but I am going to show you this one that does work on 4K. Okay, so you can see the Xbox One X there. I'm using the white cable. You can see it's snaking up to the TV, and if you look closely there, you can see that it says all the ticks are there for being able to use 4K. And if you have a look at the actual TV itself, you will see up the top there is the UHD, so that's this version of the HDR, and it's 3840 by 2160 at 60p. So you can see there, their maximum settings on that white cable. Now what we're going to do is we're going to hot swap it with this cheap pound shop cable, and then it won't work. Now normally when you do this, really you should have everything turned off. Just for the quickness of the video, I'm doing it while everything's on. Okay, so we're all plugged in, but absolutely no picture on the TV there. You can see that the black cable's going down. I had to tip up the Xbox One X a little bit because it's such a short cable. But there you go, it's plugged in to there, so the Xbox One X is still outputting 4K, but unfortunately the TV can't pick it up because the cable cannot handle it. What I'm going to do now is, just out of curiosity, I'm going to get the cable that was sent by my friend and then see if that can work or not. Right, okay, so that's the longer cable that was sent to me, and you can see now it's still not working. So now I'm personally not sure if the lack of earth wires is to do with the fact that it's not working on 4K, or is it just a sign that they used a really cheap cable because they were penny pinching and they didn't put those extra earth wires in, and also they've probably used a lower grade of cable, possibly copper clad aluminium or copper clad steel rather than pure copper, and in doing that it's increased the resistance of the cable, and so the signal strength is not good enough to use something like 4K down it. So that I don't know. If somebody does know that, add it down to the comments below, because then it will help future people reading this. It could just be a sign that the cable is not up to standard. In fact, what I'm going to do now is just one more test. I have got another cable with all the pins connected that I'm pretty sure will not do 4K. So let me test that one. Excellent. Okay, well, all the pins connect on that one. That is a very old, very cheap cable, and yet it looks like it is still ready to support 4K with HDR. Let's just go onto the TV, press that button there, and yeah, you can see in the top corner again. Right, so interesting. I don't know whether it's the lack of wires which is causing an issue with the 4K or not, because this cable here is not expensive, but yet if I plug it into the meter, you will see that all the pins are connected. So if I just plug it in here, press the button, you will see that, can you see there, all the pins are connected on this cable, even though it's a very cheap one. So, is it worth buying a tester? Yes, it's definitely worth buying a tester, but don't rely on it completely. Is it worth getting the other tester that I showed you? In my opinion, no, not at all. I think it's just going to lead to heartache and a whole lot of confusion. But a cheap tester like this will definitely aid your skills in fault finding, but it's still not the complete answer because it doesn't measure things like signal loss and stuff. But if you haven't got a big budget, then I definitely recommend something like this just as an extra test to aid you in your fault finding. And then if, for example, pin 9, like you've seen earlier, is not working, there's no point in using that cable because it's never going to work. But if, for example, pin 2 or pin 5 is not showing up, although this cable says it's faulty, it doesn't necessarily mean it is faulty, depending on the equipment you use it on. So if you're going out there and you're using cables on things like the Xbox One X and things like the PlayStation 4 Pro, then I would recommend getting a better quality cable, one that is possibly certified as a premium cable, because then you know if the customer in the future is using it on a 4K TV with HDR, you know that that cable is going to handle it. But if you're just doing this for yourself, then I personally wouldn't go out and buy cables. I would test the cables you've already got, even though they're old, to see if they do the job you want them to do, and if they don't, then you can spend the money on more expensive cables. So I hope you found this video informative. If you did, appreciate it if you give it a thumbs up, and please subscribe for more how-to videos. Take care, bye now.